Hello, welcome to Black Comics Universe. I am your host, Imani Lateef, creator of Peep Game Comics. Black Comics Universe streams every Tuesday at 6 on all DSPs, including Facebook, YouTube, Twitch, and Twitter. Please help us out by giving us a like and share, and fans. Today, one of the head honcho comics, but Black Comic Keys and Black Comics History. My computer is super laggy today, so I probably here. Let me.
Hello, everyone. How are you doing? Imani, your camera is kind of dragging, so I can't hear you, but I'm glad to be here. I believe Imani is experiencing technical difficulties.
While he gets stuff reset there, Marcus.
Okay.
Imani's having typical back from a holiday technology. Let me know when you're good to go, buddy, and I'll bring you back in. So, Marcus, why don't you start telling everybody about your day job? You're here to talk about the history of Black comics, and it's always real interesting to hear you talk about it. But tell everybody what your day job is.
My day job is I am the COO of Second Sight Publishing, Bradley Golden being the CEO. We are a small press, independent comic book publishing house. And we currently have maybe 35 or 40 titles signed to our roster. This month in previews, being the Horror Month special, we've published 8 different horror titles for retailers to get out and choose from. And Imani is back. What's going on, Imani?
Lemony Snickets, Marcus. Lemony Snickets.
I hear you.
But yeah, is that better, Kyle? I don't think it's as laggy as it was before.
All right,
I think we're good. All right, so although I look like I'm in a fishbowl, but either way, we're good. So check it out. So yeah, like I said, when I hit you up on Facebook, I just picked up a copy of Invisible Men, and I was really excited about that. And like I was telling you, a lot of the creators in this book we've discussed on here, before. And I wanted to, but it was interesting because we talk a lot about Black comic book collecting and Black comic book keys. And these actually, not just this book, but these last couple of weeks have been really huge for Black comics when you think about it. All right, yeah, Kyle can hear and see me. All right, good. We're on the money. So I've been noticing the last couple of weeks have been really huge, and I want to get your take on some of the books, like some of the key books that came out this week. Like for instance, and I'm not sure if everybody's hip to this, but Spirit's Destiny by my friend Dorfis Jean. This cover, this is a exclusive Larry Stroman cover here. which I think is some of his most newest work to date. I haven't seen him do much comic book work lately. I could be wrong. I think he might have did some work with either Bitterroot or Excellence, but that's some of the newest stuff I've seen him do in a long while. So I was really excited to get that in the mail. And of course, as everybody knows, Static came out this week, and I tried to get as many of those variant covers for the book. What did you think of the Static of the whole Milestone relaunch, Marcus?
Well, I personally, and I know this is, I'm probably echoing a lot of people's sentiments, but I personally feel like it is one of the biggest things this year because we have been wanting to see the return of these characters. We have been wanting to see really the excellence in comics that Milestone represented and still represents. And more importantly, we want to see more heroes that look like us. We want to have more stories out there that reflect our experience, but they are in the superhero genre. You know,
right.
We have been asking for, like I said, asking for this, and we believe now with Milestone's return that we'll start getting those things. So it's very big. Now, I hadn't read it yet. Not yet. I'm going to try not to do like I did with the original Milestone books, buy them and just don't open them. I just want to preserve I don't want to get fingerprints on them. I don't want to breathe too hard on them.
Yeah.
I'm going to try not to do that. But as you said, we discuss often collecting these comic books and things that will be key collectors. And this Static, we know, is definitely a key collector. It is definitely a key collector. Every variant, every cover, it's going to be a key collector.
There's some variants I haven't been able to find. They're already selling one of the variants. I think the black and white Coipel variant of Static. I've already seen it for $70-some already.
Wow.
And I haven't, and it's weird. It's like, I'm not sure. It's weird because I have sort of like gotten back into collecting. So it's sort of like I'm not totally aware of all the rules behind all these variants and stuff like that. So for instance, the local shop that I picked up my variants from, right? Now, all the variants are cover price regularly for have the regular cover price on it. But immediately, for instance, the Dennis Cohen variant was already priced at $35. They didn't waste any time. It just came out that day, but it was already priced at $35. I saw a copy of the black and white version cover of the Oliver Coipel cover. It was already priced at close to $80. And I was like, oh, I thought there was sort of like, I thought that, that creators waited. I thought that shops waited a while. They let people, creators get in on the ground, or fans get in on the ground floor on these books. But immediately, man, these books are going through the roof, man, already.
Well, a lot of it sometimes has to do with the actual number of books they produce. Some of these variants will be 1 in 50s. There'll be 1 in 25s, 1 in 100s even. So the more limited number that they produce, the higher the book is going to be. So if you're coming across a variant that's a 1 in 50, then it's going to be priced high coming off the shelves, because the value of that book is going to grow exponentially because there's only 50 copies out there. Right.
Like once they're gone. And then like for instance, this past week, I didn't order, which I should have. And this is another part of the, comic book collecting I'm still getting used to again. is that I didn't pre-order my copy of White from Black Mask, the next volume of the Black series, and immediately every shop I went to, they were sold out.
They were gone.
And they can only, and some of them, and I guess Kyle, you're welcome to chime in on this. Like, you can only order 2 at a time. Each shop can only order 2 or something like that. Something crazy.
I guess I can speak to 2 things here. One, you guys were talking about one of your ratio variants, right? And so I was Imani's LCS when I still had an LCS, when I was still when I still had my store open. So you're making a 1 in 50 variant, right? And that means I have to order 50 to get 1 copy. If I can only sell 30 copies, I got to eat that other 20. Right? So that's where that markup comes from some places. It's covering that 20 extra books you had to order more than you thought you could sell.
Got it.
And what I would usually do is if somebody bought the 1 in 50 and I had 20 extra copies, those 20 extra copies are going on the kids' rack for free. Like, that was how I always did things. It was a great way to get young people into books. But the second thing here is with White, they only printed 2,500. If 1,500 retailers order 3 apiece, you're already over. Right. So what they did is they allocated 2 per store, and stores got 2. Now, I know some stores did exclusive printings and, variant runs and that kind of stuff. So there are more out there than
I was able to get,
but not too many.
Right.
Yeah, that 2,500 number. That 2,500 number that Kyle is talking about, for those who aren't aware, Diamond actually has a ideal number of books that they want each title to sell, and that ideal number of books is 2,500. So at 20, so for a publisher, especially if you got a property, that's hot, you can hit that 25 number easy and exceed that number. If you exceed that number, now we're talking second printing. Now we're talking reorders, back orders, that type of thing.
But let me ask you a question, Marcus, because you'll be able to answer this. I've never talked to a publisher who could answer it. Black Mask, I would say, is actually probably smaller than Second Sight in terms of the size of the company. I mean, you and Marcus, I think that probably doubles, or you and Bradley, that probably doubles Black Mask in terms of operational size. So what does a print run look like on a book from Second Sight by comparison, just so people kind of have an idea? Are you guys printing 5,000 copies of stuff? Is that like a pretty good size print run for you?
Yeah, well, first, the biggest difference between Black Mask and Second Sight is Black Mask is its company and they produce their books. Second Sight, on the other hand, we publish other people's books. So they may have 2 or 3 titles that they produce that each of those titles are hitting that number, hitting that 2,000, 2,500 mark. And we'll have that same thing. We'll have 2 titles, 3 titles. A good example is like Duplicant. Duplicant sold out at every store that it went into. And then there were reorders. So that means we had to print up more books. We have probably printed up an additional 1,000 copies of this book, filling reorders and filling back orders. And it's now going into a second printing because of the reorders and back orders of the book. Divine Retribution by Austin Janowski. Austin's book sold out. And the reorders, they're sold out. So his book is going in for a second printing. And we're actually going to do a special director's cut for his second printing. Another title, The Edge, Marvin Wynn. His title, his number 1, sold out, went for a second printing, which means those titles hit that number, that ideal number that Diamond wants to, and then it exceeded that number.
Right.
So those books move on into the 3,000 range and 4,000 range.
Okay, got it. And see, I was going in a particular order, but now I want to jump to a couple of questions that I have for you. now, because I think the conversation we have right now goes perfectly with this. So in our culture, they definitely have pushed the idea of being independent or remaining independent, not signing to, major publishers and things like that. Relying on Kickstarter, right? To fund their books and to fund their endeavors, especially in comics, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I'm starting to rethink the whole strategy, and especially after I met you, it actually got me to thinking a little broader on the whole idea of comic book publishing as an independent creator, only because it's like when independents begin to scale, they really need to rethink and reevaluate how they approach selling comics. When you're talking about 2,500, selling 2,500 comics, the vast majority of independent creators aren't doing those numbers, and that's nothing to take away from the work ethic that I know for a fact that they're putting in. Like I see the quality of work that they're putting out, the marketing that they put behind their Kickstarters and things like that. But it isn't until they have stepped into, in some shape, form, or fashion, into the direct market, then they see the numbers, that they're, the ideal numbers of, 2,500 copies and things like that. And I wanted to know if you could speak to maybe like the pros and cons of, remaining independent, or, compared to, possibly looking for a publisher. It doesn't even have to be a major publisher. Like, even like I've noticed, like soon after we talked, one of our interviews, I saw that, Hannibal Taboo and Hannibal Taboo had jumped in with you guys on Second Sight. And I always thought that, okay, that's a really smart move, because I've seen them work independently. I've seen what they can do on their own. And I think that, them working with a publisher that has a deeper, say for instance, a deeper, what you call it, a deeper vehicle, basically has a larger audience. There's
a bigger platform.
A bigger platform, yeah. And I wanted you to speak to those concepts.
Well, I often compare this to the college basketball, to the finals, because I remember that, coming up and seeing college teams that dominated. I mean, they were always there. And then all of a sudden, a team like Loyola will pop up.
Right.
And they will make it, they will get past the Sweet 16, and they'll get there in the Elite 8. And then, they may get beaten, but it's a wake-up call for all those other big schools that there are sleeping giants out there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And you see it all the time. You see it all the time. And I imagine these coaches telling their players from these smaller schools, you are in the dance. You are at the big show. This is where, when you started dribbling the ball as a little guy, this is where you envision yourself being. You are here. So now let's show everybody that you deserve to be here and why you are here. So that's independent comic book creators coming onto the bigger platform, because there are sleeping giants like Hannibal and Quinn, like Ramon Bovilla, like Jonathan Hedrick, like Alfred Page, like Aaron Pahar. They're sleeping giants that waiting to get in the dance, waiting to get past, the 32 and into the 16 and then into the Elite 8, moving into the Final Four. So I often make that comparison with the guys, because it is a whole different thing. You're not playing on the playground anymore. playground rules don't apply.
Right.
So you are on this platform now. This is where you say you want to be. So let's show them why you deserve to be here, which means, let's provide the best content, the highest quality content that you can. Let's meet production schedule. Let's meet production goals, because these are things that are now required in order for you to be here where you say you wanted to be.
Now that's a really good point. Like, would you say that's one of the biggest differences of, between sort of like doing it on your own than compared to, say, it's not even just leveling it up into the direct market, like being able to stick to a strenuous production schedule?
Yeah, production schedule is probably the biggest key in that, when you have a property and you are publishing this book, and now it's hit the retail stores, you're building a fan base. Now, how long does your fan base have to wait for your next issue? When you are self-publishing, or when you're not publishing in the mainstream, which is very demanding, then you can turn out books as often as you want to, every year, every 6 months, that type of thing, because you create your own demand and supply. But when you're in the mainstream, you are in a whole nother supply and demand chain. And the demand, particularly if you have a property that people are digging, if everybody's loving your book and you're selling 2,000, 3,000 copies of your book, then they really don't want to wait 6 months for the next issue, because that 2,000, 3,000 is definitely going to drop. It can get cut in half, and you'll see an exponential loss in numbers the longer that fans have to wait. So being able to produce the material. Now, the whole thing is, when you're talking about competing with a company like Marvel or DC, who produces titles every month, we as a small press company, we actually only have one title that we were able to do that with, which was Marvin Wins The Edge. We're going to do that monthly. But for the other creators and their properties, and knowing their production and knowing what is comfortable for them, we went bi-monthly, because now with a bi-monthly schedule, you have 2 months between the time your book hits previews and the book hits the shop. It's a 2-month period. So if you already have a book done, now you've gained 4 months. And in 4 months, the average creator can actually produce a book, because what's required is money. These guys, if you're artists, as long as you're paying your artists, then they're going to work. It just happens like that. And as long as your publishing company is paying you, then you're able to pay your artists. So,
and I work in print, and I know, not in comics, but I work in magazine publishing, and that 2 months sounds like a long time, but it's not. It's like it's really more like a month and a half, if that. It's really, it's like that's a tight window. So
it's
like
5 weeks. It is 5 weeks.
And that fifth week is sort of like it's hell week. Like it's got to be on the page and out the door, man. But I can talk about that, even in more depth, because that production schedule, I think I think you're right. I think that's probably the biggest thing that a lot of indies don't necessarily discuss, because I'm in a lot of circles where they talk about the business of creating independent comics and stuff like that, but they're not talking about it on the scale that I know is necessary to really reach the numbers that they really want to get to. It's sort of like the average independent creator that I talk to is selling around 300 to maybe 500 books every time they put out a book. But that production schedule, we're talking about 6 to 8 months in between each book that they put out. Yeah. So I think I'm starting to understand where and how to scale that their work is in their production schedule.
Well, something else too that I think the independent creators lose sight of is these big corporate comic companies. And that's really what they are. They're corporate comic companies. And what they do is they have planning and strategy meetings. They bring in, if they know what they want to do for the upcoming year, they bring in the people who they want to do this project, and these people get to work. And before that project actually hits the stands, they're 6-7 issues into it. Or if it's a mini series, they've written all 5 issues. All 5 issues are probably already drawn, and now it's being released. Whereas what you find with independent creators, they do issue 1, and now they're working on issue 2 to be released whenever they get finished, whenever it's done. So you might have to wait 5-6 months, like you said, just to get issue 2. And if they have gotten issue 2 out in 5 or 6 months, then you're not going to see issue 3, if there is an issue 3, until the next year.
Right. Now, where do you?
Now, for you guys, some independent creators, their whole strategy or planning is, I'm going to do 1 issue a year, and then I'm going to spend the rest of the year promoting and publicizing this issue. Well, that's cool, but that's the numbers that you just said, that 400, 500 copies sold. That's when they're settling for that. Maybe they hit 1,000 copies sold on this book. Let me even hit 15,000 copies sold in that year time for that 1 book. So, or 1,500 rather. So, it is all in the production, getting the books out. Because if you don't get the books out, then you don't sell them.
Right. And I'm gonna come back to this conversation. I do want to make sure we get to the book that I wanted to talk about, Invisible Men. I got my copy, and this is like we were talking about distribution and stuff like that. I don't know what it is about this book, but yeah, it took me like 3 weeks to get my copy. It took me a minute.
Waiting on mine.
Yeah, and it's like, and at first I went to, I ordered a copy from an LCS, and they took it, like, as they were waiting for it to come in, like the guy said, well, you know what, I'm not sure if I'm going to get it in. And then I went to Barnes and Noble, and they were going to take a week. And then my book actually came in at the LCS. So I ended up actually getting it from them. But I remember but before I don't know, it was just hard to find this book. It was just so hard to get it. And I was just really happy to actually get a copy of it. And, I know you actually wrote an article on World of Black Superheroes.
Yeah.
About a lot of these creators. And I'm going to share that link, later on this evening, because that was it's a very informative article, and a lot of the creators that are in this book are actually in your article as well. So I encourage everybody to not just pick up the book, but also read your article. And I'm going to share the heck out of that article, because I'm really getting into the history of comics in terms of Black comic book creators. I want to share just 2 of the creators in this book, 2 of which we talk about a lot. Hopefully I can get this to work. Today has been a heck of a day here. Let's see here.
Yeah. Also, I'd like to add that article. If you have volume 5 of the 4 pages and 16 bars, you can find the article in there as well.
Yep. Yeah. So here's the book, and we've talked about Clarence Matthew Baker before. He's the illustrator of
Phantom
Voodoo,
Lady, yes, Buddha.
Phantom Lady, and Voodoo. That's the one we really talked about. This is actually, for those who don't, and I think, this book really illustrates some of the conversations we had, beautifully. This is the first actual Black comic book, first comic book to have a Black comic book character on the cover, although he was pictured as white on the cover, right? And you had mentioned this, we had talked about him before, but it was these Phantom Lady images is that what got me, because his line work is just off the hook. And what I really like about the book is that like they present like whole pages in very, somewhat, pretty much pristine format, and like the artwork is this phenomenal.
Yeah, Matt Baker was known as the master of the feminine form, and his illustrations were so famous and they were done so well that back in the days they would send these comic books overseas to the soldiers during wartime, and you see pinups of his characters gracing the lockers of the soldiers. But yeah, his illustrations, his line work, man, it is the absolute best in the business.
Man, I was just blown away by some of the work, and what's really interesting about the book is not only does he talk about basically how these artists were trained and how they got into the business. He also discusses by and large how these generationally Black folks migrated to the North, and where they found, and this is where in the North is where they found these jobs in illustration, working for publishers and things of that nature. So he also discusses, how, these artists actually broke into the industry, and a lot of them broke into the industry very young, right? Yeah. I don't know if you know this artist, but I found something that I know that you're going to dig, man. And that is, well, first I got to, again, like there's some in this book, these Phantom Lady pages are just amazing, man. Like from the lettering, everything. It's like I can't help myself.
It's hard to believe that these books are from the 40s.
Yeah.
And this is the level of skill and craftsmanship that was being produced in comic books in the 40s.
And to a degree, it feels like it's better than it is now. And I only say that because I don't want to be like an old fogey or anything, but it's sort of like, even when I see a lot of student work too, or like, beginning artists, work from beginning artists. And I know the tendency to over render their work is present in a lot of beginner work. And these pages are perfectly rendered. You know what I mean? It's sort of like just the right amount of line work and ink and, attention to detail. And, I would encourage any artist to study these pages when you're talking about layout and, storytelling. It's just really, really, really good work. But what I thought you would really dig would be this here. Alvin Carl Hollingsworth. Are you familiar?
Yes, I'm very familiar with Alvin Hollingsworth. I was introduced to Alvin Hollingsworth from the Negro Romance comics.
Okay. Okay. Right.
Yeah, he was hired in to provide the art for the Negro comics, as well as some other comics, as you see, the Diary of Horror. And I want to kind of go back to one of the things you were saying, as far as Matt Baker and the history and how the guys got on, because I'm quite sure Alvin Hollingsworth was a part of this same type system. But the book mentions a gentleman named E.C. Stoner.
Yes.
E.C. Stoner was a descendant of a slave, one of George Washington's slaves. But he did artwork, provided pencil work for different publishers, but he worked out of what they call like a writing room, or a drawing room, where you had different artists who would do work for publishers, and they would emanate from that room, and that room kind of served as a buffer. So the publishers didn't know whose artwork they were getting. They just knew they were getting artwork from this particular art room or writing room.
Right. And they do discuss that a lot, that a lot of the books, they didn't have names. There was no way to tell who the artist was on certain comic books. Their names weren't on, the covers or on the inside or mastheads or anything like that. Right. So until much later in some of these artists' career, until they got credit. For instance, Hollingsworth, he started when he was 14.
Yes, when he was 14.
14 years old, which I find is amazing. But like for a lot of these artists, for their early work, they weren't being recognized at all.
No. We talked about this before. It wasn't, artists didn't start getting credited for their work on the covers or in comic books until Wayne Howard, who was a black artist, a black comic creator, and that was in the 70s.
Gotcha. So, and this is E.C. Stoner, the one guy you mentioned here.
Yeah.
What I find interesting about Hollingsworth also, he started when he was 14. And what was really interesting about him was that the school that he went to for the arts when he was in high school, his classmate or one of his friends that actually told him that he should go into this school, or suggested that he go into the school, was none other than Joe Kubert.
Isn't that something?
And that's something. And of course, Kubert mentions that it wasn't about race for him at the time. It was just like he recognized talent, and he happened they happened to be friends when they were younger. And so just to see how, what I'm learning a lot about the comic book industry, overall as well, not just historically, but and when it comes to business, who plays a huge role will play a huge role in your success. You know what I mean? So it's like, I can't stress enough the idea of networking and, working with folks. I think relationships are one of the, biggest assets that any, creator can have, stepping into comic books.
Oh yeah, and that's a fact. And even I, entering into comic books, benefited from having a friend like Tony Cottrell in Advent Comics, who first published my book, who published The Protector. So, as you said, it is, as much as we may not want to admit it, oftentimes it's who you know. Yep. But that who you know is, it really should be said like this, is who you have networked with.
Yes. Because
some creators tend to not network outside of their group or clique.
Right. And not just that, I noticed a lot, the question I see a lot from people that are starting out is they're immediately asking, how did they start a comic book business? And I'm starting to wonder if they're sort of like, if some if some independent creators are, it feels like they're starting to put the cart before the horse a bit. I'm starting to be of the mind that it's like, it's probably far more important for you to work in the comic book industry before you actually start a comic book business per se. And that just might just be me. And I'm, as far as if you're going to be, we can all have aspirations of becoming, a publisher, a comic book publisher. But I think in this industry, I think it's very important that you might, if you're a writer, you might want to write for someone else first. Or if you're an illustrator, you might want to illustrate for someone else first. Things like that. I might be, well, what do you think about that?
I think you're spot on because we find a lot of comic book creators, comic book writers, comic book artists who want to go into the business of comics, but they don't actually know or fully understand the business aspect.
Right.
Because comic book business is just that, business. It may be about comic books, but it is business. It is straight up business. Right. So if you don't know, or if you don't have any business acumen, then you are already lost. You've already started on the bottom. So it's having that business acumen. Then it's learning. People who are successful don't say, okay, I'm gonna do something, and then all of a sudden it's $1 million business. They pay some type of dues through hard work, through building, through learning to get to the point where they're at. And then they will recognize the move they need to make in order to level up.
Right.
Some people start off thinking, well, we're going to sell 10,000 copies of this book as soon as we get in the mainstream, and they hadn't even gotten in the mainstream yet. They hadn't even done the work necessary in order to find out, well, how do I get into the mainstream? Or they talk about selling books and don't understand about distribution networks, things of that nature. So you got to learn. If you don't know, then you won't be able to take advantage of it.
And that's on top of actually learning the culture that's behind creating comics, because it's like learning the actual process of creating that comic, learning the process of visual storytelling compared to prose writing and things like that. It's definitely is several learning curves, not just one or two. It's several learning curves to tackle in order to actually have a quote unquote comic book business. And but at the same time, what's beautiful about it is there's several ways you can approach it. You don't have to necessarily approach it from a huge distribution, platform. You can approach it from, if you're just, you can approach it from being published by a major publisher, pitching your idea to a major publisher. You can approach it from, as small as, in the small press, creating mini comics. I've gotten some books from creators that are, it looks like this book was made on, some type of photocopier, but it's quality work. And it's sort of just a small press, a boutique style book.
Right.
But that's mine. And what's amazing is that those creators go on to work for major publishers, based off of the popularity of those small books. So these, there's something to be said about, basically being a part of the culture.
Right. Well, that's how we got started. With Second Sight. Bradley Golden, he published his first book out of his mother's basement, ran off copies of the pages and hand stapled them together to make a book, and would take them to cons to sell, the equivalent of selling out of your trunk. So getting started, just understanding the process is important.
Right.
Setting goals is important. That one of the what we say is an advantage there with Second Sight, for example, and I know we aren't the only company like this, but what we feel is an advantage is the fact that we aren't a bunch of corporate people. We all are independent comic book creators, and we have pooled our knowledge together to form a company. But we are independent comic book creators, so we understand the culture. We understand the lifestyle. We are our creators, and I say that often because we know what it means to have that primary job, the one that's actually putting the money in the house and paying the bills, and yet you're trying to produce a comic book and get that going at the same time, and you have that pressure, making that sacrifice, and just having a publisher that understands that is important as well. And as you mentioned, as far as publishing your work with other publishers, that was one of the first things we did. Once we came up with a property we felt like would sell, which was the Mississippi Zombie, we pitched the Caliber Comix. So that's initially how we got into the whole distribution network, into the mainstream through Caliber Comix, and they still publish Mississippi Zombie.
Once I started to realize, like, and again, like, once I really paid attention to like the work that you're doing, and how broad of a scope you guys have, I'm starting to realize it's like there's so many different ways to approach this, and I feel like I'm going back to share with independent creators, like, okay, like the next time I get that question as far as how do I start a comic book business? It's like, I used to have like only 2 or 3 answers, but now it's really like closer to like 10 or so. If you really want to get into this, there's tons of ways you can approach this. And I had one,
even in the level, even the level that you want to be on when you're doing the business. Not everyone has aspirations of being in Diamond and having their books distributed out worldwide. They are comfortable having their book, publishing their own books, being able to control every single aspect as far as how the book is distributed, where the book is distributed, how they market the book, and they're comfortable with the amount of sales that they receive from doing it their way. And it's important that they do it their way. While you have others, we come across creators whose main goal or aspiration is to be published by Diamond. That's what they want. I want to get my book in Diamond. I want to get in the retail stores, and because that is their aspiration, then because we are in the position to do it, we accommodate them. But we weren't always in that position to accommodate them. Let me get my phone here. There you go. Yeah, we weren't always in that position to accommodate them, and we had creators who passed. We've had guys tell us, no, I'm waiting on Dark Horse. I'm waiting on Image to pick us up. And I scratch my head, like, you realize that your book will be going into the same place where Image and Dark Horse are going to be putting their books. The exact
and I will attest to that. The last time I was in the LCS, I looked up, and it seems like, I don't know what y'all been doing, but it seemed like all of a sudden it's just like y'all were here, and then all of a sudden it's like I've seen issues of chess in my LCS. One of the books that you guys print out, and I think about 3 or 4 other titles, man. I see you on the rack every week, and I have to admit there's something to be said about that. You know what I mean? Because you might be waiting for maybe a bigger advance from a bigger publisher or something like that. But if your idea is to get that major distribution, I will admit that, yes, Second Sight is basically putting books on the rack. If it's sort of like was that episode of Wire on HBO show where they talk about like drugs on the table. It's like this definitely. The Second Sight is definitely putting books on the rack. It's like, if the business model is that simple, If like you just want to see your book in the shop, you know, the books on the rack, the Second Sight is doing that, man. And I love, you know, the work ethic y'all putting behind it and everything you guys are doing lately.
Well, we consider ourselves, and we'll probably always consider ourselves to be independent comic book creators. And as a company, having that independent comic book creator mentality, we get out and we hustle, we grind. You know, we hit the pavement. We once again, we understand what our creators want because we are our creators. They want exposure. Not trying to be brag or anything, but last year we were mentioned one time, maybe twice in Bleeding Cool. This year, almost every month. You know, so that exposure, getting that, you know, getting
you can
names and the titles out there.
You can see the momentum too. It's like that. It starts. It might start out small, but I'm starting to see how it's starting to, like, you know, fall over itself. It's like
I've seen it.
Yeah. All within the last year, man. So kudos to you guys, man. For sure.
We appreciate it. We appreciate it. Because we represent independent comic book creators, and to have someone like Hannibal and Quinn, Ramon Gavia, Jonathan Hedrick, these guys come to us and say, "Look, we like what you are doing. We trust that you all are going to take our properties and help us take them to the next level." And that's the big thing for Bradley and I. And that motivates us, the fact that people are trusting us to, you know, achieve their dream.
Yep.
So that's definitely motivation.
I had one more question, and it's probably gonna blow up my my timeline with this, and I'm not sure. Hopefully you'll be able to, you know, I got 3 minutes. I wanted to ask you this specifically because I was listening to another podcast, and this creator was basically, you know, talking about the doom and gloom of the direct market and comic book shops, and he was speaking directly to the idea that basically DC was going to basically stop printing comics in the next year. I know it's a crazy idea, and the more I think about it, it's like it sounds even more and more ridiculous. But do you guys operate under any type of sense of urgency like that? It's like in the event that does happen, like you guys have the wherewithal to like step into the void?
Well, using another sports anecdote, we don't play scared.
Okay.
We don't play scared. You won't win
like
playing
that.
scared.
No, right.
So we don't play scared. We are attacking the market. We got product that we know will sell, and it's being proven that we are bringing quality product. So not to sound, once again, you know, all with bravado or whatever, but we're not worried about what DC is going to do, because if DC stopped printing comics today, then there are a whole slew of people ready to step up into their place to provide the content that DC would be taking away. If Marvel stopped printing books today, it's a whole slew of people that are ready to step into that void. One of the things that I appreciate about Diamond is that because they saw how things were going with Marvel and DC, they said, we are going to bring more independence to the forefront. You know, we're not going to be held captive by these guys who think they run the market. So they have made a concerted effort to bring in more independent publishing companies like us, like Tony Cottrell and Advent. You know, and kudos to Tony, congratulations, because that's a big step for his company. That's moving into the next level, a level that he wanted to go to, as far as obtaining now more distribution, a wider distribution network. So I encourage any independent comic book company, if you feel like you have the product and can meet the production, then approach them and reach out to them.
Yeah.
Kick their doors in. Do what you got to do to get their attention and get your stuff in front of them, because they are actually looking for you.
Yes, they are looking. And with that, I think I'm running out of time here. And for Marcus Roberts of Second Sight Studios, at Second Sight Studios on all social media. And for me,
Second Sight Publishing.
Second Sight Publishing, my fault. Second Sight Publishing. For me, Imani Lateef for Peep Game Comics, and Kyle for The Experience. We are out. Thank you for watching Black Comics Universe.